My wife kissed her boss at the party, praising him to everyone. I didn't react. That one sentence is the entire story, but it is not where the story starts. No. It starts long before that night, in a world that looked nothing like tragedy. It starts with two people who were so deeply, so completely in love, that the idea of losing each other was the furthest thing from their minds. My name is Ashton, and this is the story of how one silent night shattered everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. I met Rebecca almost a decade ago, and I want you to understand, this was not a slow burn. This was not the kind of connection you have to talk yourself into. The moment I saw her, standing in front of a bright canvas at an art gallery fundraiser, something inside me shifted. She was stunning, a talented black woman from Harlem, full of fire and ambition and grace, and I was just some hopeful white guy from a quiet Midwestern town, completely out of his depth. I made a joke about modern art. A joke. And she laughed. That laugh, musical, genuine, completely unguarded, pulled me in like gravity. We talked for hours that night. Jazz and classic rock. Her stories growing up in New York against my small-town stories of football games and stargazing. Every word knitted us closer together. And that is the thing about Rebecca. She knitted worlds together. Our worlds, mine and hers. We were an interracial couple in every sense. And yes, the world reminded us of that constantly. But we faced it together. I brought her to my parents' farm, where she saw the Milky Way for the first time. She brought me to Sunday service in Harlem, where gospel music shook the walls and filled my chest with something I had never felt before. My grandmother, old-fashioned as she was, raised an eyebrow the first time she met Rebecca. By the end of the weekend, they were swapping recipes in the kitchen like lifelong friends. We were, by every measure, the kind of couple that made people believe in love. So when we married, the dream was simple. Build a life. Build it together. And for a while, for a beautiful golden while, that is exactly what we did. Morning coffees, late-night slow dances in our kitchen, surprise dates at art exhibitions, the kind of quiet, ordinary magic that most people overlook, but that is, in truth, the foundation of everything. Then Rebecca got the job, a prestigious marketing firm in Manhattan. From day one, she set her sights on the top. And I want to be clear, I was proud, prouder than I have ever been of anyone. She looked at me one night, eyes bright, and said she wanted to become someone influential. Someone who could show young black girls that they could make it. I pulled her close and promised I would support every single one of her dreams. And I meant it. My own career was quieter. Graphic design for a small publishing company. Steady, stable, unremarkable by the world's standards, but it gave me balance. And balance was something my family had always taught me to value. Rebecca's upbringing was different. Excellence, ambition, rising above every limitation that had been placed on her. Our approaches to life were not the same. But in those early years of marriage, that difference was not a crack. It was just texture. And then a name started appearing in our conversations. Graham Whitaker, Rebecca's CEO. At first, it was just work. Graham liked her proposal. Graham was trusting her with a new client account. I was excited for her. The CEO was noticing her talent, and in a company where few people looked like her at the top, that meant everything. One evening, I glanced over and saw his name on her phone. She was smiling. He had sent a compliment about her work. I kissed her forehead and said, "I'm so proud of you." And I was. Completely. Genuinely. I had no idea, none, that this man's name would become the fault line running through the center of my marriage. But here is what I want you to hold on to, because this is where most people make a mistake when they hear a story like this. They look for the villain. They look for the single moment everything went wrong. The truth is uglier and quieter than that. The truth is that the distance between Rebecca and me did not begin with Graham. It began with silence. Mine, hers, ours. It began the first time she answered an email at dinner, and I said nothing. The first time I ate alone because she was at a late meeting and I simply waited. The first time I felt something uneasy stir inside me, a small cold flicker when she mentioned another one-on-one dinner with Graham, and I swallowed it down. Because I did not want to be the husband who held his wife back. Because I trusted her. Because trusting felt easier than confronting the fear that was slowly, quietly, taking root. My closest friend Peter saw it before I did. He pulled me aside one night at the pub. I had been sitting there alone again, waiting, and he said bluntly, "The way only a real friend can, that sounds like a slippery slope. You sure there is nothing going on?" I defended Rebecca without hesitation. "She would never," I told him. "She loves me. She is just working hard." Peter held up his hands. He did not push. But he said one thing that stayed with me long after that night. He said, "Just keep an eye open." I did not really, not the way I should have, because by then the gala was coming, the annual company party, an award ceremony, and Rebecca, my Rebecca, was about to walk onto that stage and receive everything she had worked for. I helped her into her emerald green gown that evening. I told her she was the most beautiful woman in the world. And standing there in that doorway, watching her smile back at me, I believed, with every single part of my heart, that nothing in the world could touch what we had built together. I was wrong, and the night was about to prove it. But here is what I need you to think about before we go any further, because this is the question that has kept me awake at night ever since. If the people closest to you were slowly drifting away from you, not all at once, but inch by inch, in the quiet spaces between your days, would you even notice? Or would you be too busy believing in the version of your life you wanted to see? American Storytelling, Act 2 voiceover script. Now, here is where everything changes. I left off telling you about a man who walked into a gala believing his marriage was unbreakable. A man who zipped up his wife's emerald green gown, told her she was the most beautiful woman alive, and meant every single word. That man, me, was about to learn the most brutal lesson of his life, not in a single explosion, not in one loud, dramatic moment, but in a series of quiet, devastating ruptures, each one cracking open something that could never fully close again. And the worst part, the very first crack happened on a stage in front of hundreds of people, and I did absolutely nothing about it. So let me take you back to that ballroom. The golden lights, the hum of conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses. Rebecca had just walked up to that stage to accept her award, the award she had fought, clawed, and bled for. And I was sitting in that crowd, hands together, heart swelling with pride, thinking, this is her moment. This is everything she worked for. And it was. It truly was. The announcer spoke her name. The room erupted in applause. I whistled, 2 fingers in my mouth, loud enough to make the people around me laugh, because she deserved that. She deserved to feel like a queen in that moment. And when she stepped up to that microphone, trembling just slightly, radiant under those lights in that emerald green gown, her brown skin glowing against the jewel tone, her curls swept up just the way she liked them, I thought I had never loved her more in my entire life. I was looking at the woman I had chosen, the woman who had chosen me back. And for one last perfect second, everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Rebecca began her speech the way you would expect. She thanked the team. She thanked her family. She thanked me, glanced back, smiled, and my chest nearly burst. And then she turned her attention to Graham. At first, it sounded normal. A subordinate, acknowledging a mentor. Thank you for creating an environment where leaders can thrive. Standard. Professional, fine. But then, and I want you to pay attention here because this is where the tone shifted. Her voice changed. It dropped lower. It softened. The room, which had been casually applauding and murmuring, grew quiet. Not the quiet of boredom. The quiet of people sensing something raw and unscripted was happening in front of them. Rebecca looked directly at Graham, not at the crowd, not at the camera, at him, and she said, "You believed in me when I doubted myself. You encouraged me when no one else did. I owe so much of my growth to you." There was a sincerity in her voice that cut through everything else in that room. And I want to be honest with you. In that moment, a part of me was still proud, because someone finally saw what I had seen in her for years. But another part of me, A quieter part, a deeper part, felt something cold slide through my chest, because I realized, sitting there in that crowd, that I had not heard Rebecca speak about anyone, with that kind of fire and vulnerability in a very long time. Not even me. I pushed that thought down. I told myself, this is her night. This is not about you. Let her have this. And then she did something that no one in that room was expecting. Not me, not Graham, not a single person. Rebecca stepped away from the microphone. She turned toward Graham's table, and she walked toward him, slowly, deliberately. He stood up, maybe expecting a handshake, maybe a polite hug, the kind of warm gesture you see at the end of every corporate speech in the world. But Rebecca did not shake his hand. She wrapped her arms around him. She held him close. And then, and I want you to picture this exactly the way it happened, because the details matter, she kissed him. Not on the cheek, on the lips. It was brief. It was not dramatic. It was not some passionate Hollywood moment pulled from a romance novel. But it was unmistakable. It was a kiss, a real kiss, in front of every single person in that ballroom. In front of me. The room reacted before I did. Gasps, a few uncomfortable laughs. Someone at my table muttered something I could not quite hear over the ringing in my ears. And I sat there, completely still, champagne flute in hand, hands trembling so badly I had to set the glass down. Before I dropped it, my face went hot, then cold. My mouth went dry. My stomach dropped so fast, it felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. And here is what I need you to understand about that moment, because people will ask, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you stand up? Why didn't you storm over there and demand an explanation in front of everyone? The answer is not that I was weak. The answer is that the human mind, when it is confronted with something it cannot yet process, does not scream. It freezes. It shuts down completely. It goes devastatingly, brutally silent. And that silence, that is exactly what happened to me. I was frozen, not by choice, by something deeper, something almost instinctive. A part of my brain had decided, in that split second, that if I just stayed still, if I just kept my face neutral, maybe what I had just seen was not real. Maybe the room would move on. Maybe I could pretend I had not witnessed it. That is what shock does to a person. It turns you into a statue and tells you that stillness is survival. But here is the thing that kept me rooted to that seat longer than the shock did. It was not just the kiss. It was the look on her face afterward. Rebecca stepped back from Graham, gave a small wave to the crowd as if nothing unusual had happened, and walked back to her seat. And when she glanced my way, when our eyes met across that ballroom, she was smiling. Not with guilt, not with panic. She raised her award plaque, just slightly, like we did it, like this was a victory we were sharing. And I, God help me, I nodded. I gave her a weak smile back, because some part of me, even in that exact moment, was still trying to protect her, still trying to believe that what I had just seen was not what it looked like. And some other part of me, the part that had been choosing silence for months, simply did what it always did. It looked away. Think about that for a second. Really think about it. Think about what it takes for a person to sit in a room full of people, watch their spouse kiss another man, and respond with a nod and a smile. That is not strength. That is not grace under pressure. That is a man who has spent so long swallowing his discomfort, so long choosing silence over confrontation, that even when the world is literally falling apart in front of him, his first instinct is to pretend everything is fine. I had been doing it for months, and in that single frozen moment at that gala, the pattern completed itself. Every time I had stayed quiet, every time I had let something slide, it had been building toward this, toward a version of me that could watch his wife betray him in public and simply sit there. I did not know it at the time, but that night I became exactly the man my silence had been creating. The rest of the evening was a blur. Music started playing. People danced. I sat in my chair like a statue carved from something heavy and cold. At some point, I do not even remember how much time passed, I stood up and walked out through a side door onto a balcony. The night air hit my face and I realized I could barely breathe. My mind was racing so fast it was like static, every thought crashing into the next before it could finish forming. What does that kiss mean? Has she been lying to me for weeks? For months? How long has this been building? How far has it gone? And underneath all of those questions, one louder than the rest, one that drowned everything else out. Why did I not see this coming? Rebecca found me out there a few minutes later. She came through the door, concern all over her face, asking where I had been, saying she had been looking everywhere for me. And here is what shocked me, almost as much as the kiss itself, she did not seem to understand that anything was wrong. Her worry was real. I could see it in the way her brow creased, the way her hand reached for my arm. But it was the worry of someone who thought their husband was simply feeling overwhelmed by a big event. Not the worry of someone who had just publicly kissed another man in front of his wife. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her. I wanted to say, Rebecca, do you understand what you just did? But I did not. I told her I needed air. I told her it was stuffy inside. And we stood there, side by side, looking out at the city skyline, the lights of Manhattan glittering below us like something from a postcard. And she said, "Thank you for being here tonight. Your support means everything to me." And I nodded again, because what do you say to that? What do you say when the woman you love is thanking you for your support at the exact moment she is dismantling it? I did not have an answer. Not then. The ride home was suffocating. We sat in the back of a taxi, not touching, not speaking, a gap between us on the seat that felt wider than it had any right to feel. The silence between us was not the comfortable kind, not the kind we used to share on lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers and nowhere to be. This was a silence with teeth. It was heavy and sharp, and it cut into both of us. Rebecca broke it halfway home. She asked softly if she had done something wrong, and something inside me cracked, just a little, at the way she asked it, because she sounded genuinely confused, genuinely uncertain, and that was almost worse than if she had been defiant. At least defiance would have given me something to push against. This quiet, bewildered confusion, it made me feel like I was losing my mind, like maybe I was the one who had misread the room. I told her we would talk at home. She nodded slowly. She understood that much, and the rest of that drive was the longest 10 minutes of my life. We walked into our apartment, and I could not look at her. I stood in the living room, back turned, staring at a photo on the shelf, our honeymoon, the two of us on a beach, laughing as a wave crashed at our feet. That photo felt like it belonged to a different lifetime, a different version of us, two people who had no idea what was coming. And then, in barely a whisper, I asked the only question that mattered. Why? She sounded genuinely puzzled. Why what? And I turned around and I looked at her, really looked at her, past the gown and the award and the beauty of her. And I asked, why did you kiss him? In front of everyone. In front of me. Why? What happened next was the first of several conversations that would slowly, methodically dismantle everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Rebecca's eyes went wide. She shook her head immediately, stepped toward me, hands out, the way you calm someone down. She said it was not what it looked like, and I laughed. I could not help it. A bitter, hollow laugh that surprised even me, because it absolutely was what it looked like. There is no universe, not one, in which what I saw on that stage can be reframed into something innocent. And we both knew it. The laugh hung in the air between us like smoke, and for a moment the room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She started to cry, and here is where it gets complicated, because Rebecca crying was not manipulation. It was not a tactic. I knew this woman better than I knew myself. I knew the way her face crumpled when she was genuinely broken open. I knew the sound of her real tears versus the tears she shed when she was frustrated or tired, and in that moment, standing in our living room at midnight, still in that emerald green gown, mascara starting to blur at the edges of her eyes, she was genuinely broken. She told me she was caught up in the emotion of the night, that the wine had loosened something in her, that it was meant to be gratitude, nothing more. a friendly gesture that crossed a line she did not even realize she was approaching. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly it physically hurt, a real physical ache in my chest, like something was being squeezed. Because the alternative was that the woman I had built my entire world around had feelings for someone else. And I was not ready to face that. Not yet. Not that night. Not with her standing right in front of me, crying, reaching for me. So I asked her the question that every person in my position would ask. The question that hangs in the air like smoke and does not disappear, no matter how hard you wave at it. Have you been seeing him? Behind my back? Have you been cheating on me? The words came out blunt and raw, and I did not dress them up or soften them. I was done softening things. Rebecca looked at me with something close to horror. No, Ashton, no. She said it firmly, through her tears. I have never cheated on you. I would never do that to you. And here is the thing. I believed her. I believed that specific denial, because I knew Rebecca. I knew her character. I knew that a full-blown affair, the kind with hotel rooms and hidden phone calls and weeks of deception, was not something she could maintain without me seeing it. She was not built for that kind of sustained dishonesty. But believing someone has not crossed the physical line, and believing someone has not crossed any line at all, are two very different things. And in that moment, I was starting to understand, slowly, painfully, the distance between those two truths. We sat on the couch. She told me she admired Graham, that his mentorship had meant more to her career than she could put into words. That in the emotion of that stage, the gratitude and the pride and the wine all mixed together, and she acted on an impulse she could not fully explain. I listened. I held her hands, cold, trembling hands, and I listened to every word. And at the end of it, I did something that surprised us both. I told her not to quit her job. She had offered, immediately, desperately, before I'd even finished processing what she was saying. I will quit. I will do anything. Just, please. But I said no, not because I wanted to be generous or forgiving in that moment, because I refused, on principle, on pride, on something deeper than either of those, to let Graham Whittaker have that kind of power over our lives. If Rebecca left that job, it would be because of him. It would be his influence reaching into our marriage and uprooting everything she had built. And I would not give him that. If we were going to survive this, we were going to do it on our own terms. We agreed on boundaries, no more solo dinners, no late-night texts that were not strictly about work, and I told her I wanted to meet Graham, properly, outside of the office, face-to-face, in daylight, like an adult. Rebecca agreed to everything without hesitation, and that night we held each other in bed, desperate and scared and clinging to each other like two people on a sinking ship who had just remembered they were on the same side. I lay there listening to her breathing slow into sleep, and I told myself, we can fix this. People fix things like this every day. This does not have to be the end. But here is what I did not tell you yet. And this is where the story starts to turn, really turn, into something darker. Because 2 weeks later, I sat across from Graham Whittaker at a downtown bistro on a Saturday afternoon. And I need you to sit with something while I describe this lunch, because the way it went reveals more about this story than almost anything that happened before or after it. Think about what it feels like to sit across from a man, a calm, confident, silver-haired man with a commanding presence and a polished, easy smile, and know with absolute certainty that this is the person who kissed your wife, not in a dark corner, not behind closed doors, in front of a room full of people, in front of you. What do you do with that? How do you act? Because I will tell you what I did. I smiled. I shook his hand. Firm grip, steady eyes, the whole. Performance. I made small talk about my design work and the city and the weather. I played the role of the understanding, composed husband who had nothing to prove and no reason to be threatened. I was gracious. I was polite. I was everything that the situation did not require me to be. And the whole time, the entire lunch, I was watching him. Every word he said, every gesture, every single glance he sent toward Rebecca. studying him the way you study someone. You are trying to read a book in a language you do not quite speak, trying to find the crack in the surface, trying to find the place where the real Graham showed through. Graham was smooth, devastatingly, infuriatingly smooth. He complimented Rebecca without crossing any obvious line. He congratulated us both on her success. He asked me thoughtful questions about my work. He was charming and warm and completely, maddeningly normal. And when I placed my hand on Rebecca's on the table, a small, deliberate gesture, the kind that says everything without saying a word, Graham gave a tight smile and looked away. Just for a beat, just for a fraction of a second. But I saw it. Something flickered behind his eyes. Whether it was embarrassment or guilt, or something sharper and less forgivable, I could not tell. But it was there. And it stayed with me long after we left that restaurant, long after the taste of the food was gone and the afternoon light had faded. That flicker, that tiny, unguarded moment, it told me that Graham Whittaker was not as smooth as he wanted the world to believe. For a while after that lunch, things genuinely seemed to improve. And I want to be careful here, because this part of the story is easy to skip over, easy to rush past because you already know, that it does not last. But it matters. It matters because the repair was real. Rebecca kept every promise she made. She drew boundaries at work. She responded to Graham's non-urgent messages only during business hours. She even showed me a message she sent him, quietly and without drama, letting him know she was going to keep their interactions more professional going forward. She was present at home in a way she had not been in months. Phones away at dinner, date nights back on the calendar, surprise visits to my office with lunch. The kind of small daily gestures that rebuild trust not in grand statements, but in repetition. It felt like we were climbing back up from the edge, hand over hand, one day at a time. And I was climbing too. I was meeting her halfway. I was forgiving, actively, deliberately forgiving. Not just in words, but in how I treated her, how I looked at her, how I chose to believe the best version of what had happened. For a stretch of weeks, it almost worked. It almost felt like we might actually come out of this storm stronger than before. You have heard that phrase, right? What does not kill you makes you stronger. I believed it. I believed it with everything I had. I held onto it like a rope in the dark. And then the office took it back. It happened quietly, the way the worst things usually do. Not with a bang, with a phone call, a meeting, a letter from HR. Rebecca came home one evening looking like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled something vital out. The color was gone from her face. Her shoulders, which had been carrying themselves with pride for weeks, were slumped. She sat down at the kitchen table and she told me, in a flat, defeated voice that I had never once heard from her in all the years I had known her, that she was being moved to a different department. Effective immediately. A lateral transfer, they called it in the memo. But everyone in that building knew what a lateral transfer meant in a company like that. It was not a sideways step. It was a push. It meant someone, somewhere above her, had decided that Rebecca was a liability, or at least a risk. And the cleanest way to deal with that was to move her out of sight. And the rumors that came with it, God, the rumors. Word had gotten round about that kiss at the gala. Not everyone saw it, but enough people did. Enough people whispered, and now the whispers were circling Rebecca like something predatory. One rumor said her husband, me, did not approve of her working so closely with Graham, and had demanded she distance herself. Another rumor, and this one made my blood run cold the moment she told me about it, insinuated that something inappropriate had happened between her and the CEO, and that the transfer was corporate damage control dressed up as restructuring. Rebecca was the only black woman at her level in that company. She had spent years, building a reputation that transcended every stereotype the world tried to stick to her. Every single achievement she had earned was supposed to be proof that she was more than what people assumed. And in one night, one impulsive, emotional, thoughtless kiss on a stage, all of that careful, hard-won work was suddenly in question. I could see the weight of that crushing her in real time. Not just the professional damage, the identity damage, the feeling of watching everything you built with your own hands start to crack at the foundation. I held her. I told her the gossip would blow over. I told her she was brilliant, that no rumor could erase what she had achieved, that people would move on to the next scandal soon enough. But the truth, and I have to be honest about this, is that I did not fully know if that was true. Because in corporate America, and in America in general, perception is not just powerful, it is often more powerful than fact. And for a black woman who had already been fighting twice as hard to get half as far, perception could be the difference between everything and nothing, between a career and a cautionary tale. But here is where I need to stop. Here is where I need you to sit with something uncomfortable before we go any further. Because up to this point in our story, you might be thinking, poor Ashton. He got betrayed. He got humiliated in front of a room full of people. He's the victim here. And on the surface, yes, that is true. But let me ask you this, and I need you to really sit with it before you answer. In all of those months leading up to that gala, all of those nights when Rebecca came home late, all of those moments when Graham's name kept coming up in our conversations with more and more weight behind it, how many times did Ashton actually say something? How many times did he sit Rebecca down and say the words, "I am scared. I feel like I am losing you. I need to know where we stand"? The answer, if I am being brutally honest with myself, is almost never. I brushed off Peter's warning at the pub. I swallowed my unease at our anniversary dinner. I watched her on that stage, pouring her heart out to another man, and I sat there in silence, and I called it pride. I called it support. But was it? Or was it fear? Fear of confrontation, fear of being wrong, fear of cracking open something that, once opened, might not close again. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that took me months to fully accept. I was not just a victim in this story. I was also a participant. My silence was not neutral. It was not harmless. It was not the absence of action. It was a choice, and every single time I made that choice, I gave the crack between us a little more room to breathe, a little more room to grow. Rebecca eventually confirmed this herself, not that night, but weeks later, in one of our raw, tearful late-night conversations as we tried to sort through the wreckage of everything. She told me that part of what drew her toward Graham's orbit in the first place was that she felt I was not part of her professional life at all. We lived parallel lives, she said, one at work, one at home, two separate worlds that rarely touched. Graham was woven into her ambitions, her victories, her sense of who she was becoming as a professional and as a woman. I was kept on the other side of that wall. And here is the part that cut deepest. I had helped build that wall. Every time I tuned out when she talked about a campaign or a client, every time I changed the subject because corporate politics bored me or went over my head, every time I, without meaning to, without even realizing, made her feel that the biggest, most important part of her life was something I did not care about. I had pushed her closer to him, not on purpose, but consistently, quietly, invisibly. And Graham, being the one person who was always there to engage with that side of her life, filled the space I left empty. That realization hit me harder than the kiss ever did. But the story is not over, not even close, because there was one more thing, one more piece of this that Rebecca had been carrying alone, drowning in, terrified to speak out loud, hiding behind every other confession she had already made. And when she finally said it, on a late Saturday night, halfway through a bottle of wine, with tears already forming before she had even opened her mouth, it did not just reopen the wound. It tore through everything underneath it. It took me from a man who was slowly, painfully, deliberately healing, and it dropped me into the darkest place I have ever been in my life. She looked at me across that kitchen table, and she said the words that I have replayed in my head every single day since that night. And I need you to stay with me here. I need you to hear this exactly the way I heard it. Because what she said next is not just the emotional center of this story. It is the moment that everything truly broke. She took a breath, a long, shaking breath. She looked me dead in the eyes and she said, when I was on that stage and I looked at him, a part of me felt something. It was not just admiration. It was not just gratitude. For a split second, Ashton, I thought I might be a little bit in love with him. The room went silent. The kind of silent that is not really silent at all. It is the sound of something shattering so completely that the pieces are still falling and you can hear every single one of them hit the ground. I sat there. I did not move. I did not breathe. I did not say a single word. Because there are moments in life, rare, devastating, once-in-a-lifetime moments, where language simply fails, where no sentence in the English language, no combination of words, could hold the weight of what you are feeling in your body. And this was one of them. She kept talking, the words tumbling out through her tears. She said she did not feel that way anymore. She said it was a blur, a fantasy, a confusion born from hero worship and wine, and the adrenaline of that stage. She said she loved me. She said it was always me. She said all of it, and I heard all of it, and none of it, not a single word, touched the place where those first words had landed. Because you cannot unhear something like that. You can forgive it. Maybe. One day, with time and work and patience, and a willingness to keep choosing someone, even when it hurts. But you cannot unhear it. It lives in you now. It takes up space that it will never fully give back. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, not because I was punishing her, because I could not bring myself to lie next to her in the dark and pretend I was okay. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the city lights bleeding through the window, casting pale lines across the room, and I thought about every single moment that had brought us to this place, every choice, every silence, every time I looked away when I should have looked directly at the thing that was in front of me, and I realized, with a clarity that felt almost physical, like a hand pressing down on my chest, like a weight settling into my bones, that we were not just broken. We were standing at the edge of something that I did not know if either of us had the strength to come back from. And that is where I need to leave you for now. Because what comes next, the decisions we made, the words we said, the goodbye that still lives in my chest like an open wound, that is a story for another time. But before I go, I need to ask you one final question, and I need you to be honest with yourself when you answer it. Think about someone you love. Think about the last time you felt something real, fear, doubt, unease, loneliness, the slow creeping feeling that the distance between you and someone you care about is growing, and you chose not to say it. You chose silence. You chose to let it sit. You chose to look away. Now ask yourself this: do you actually know what that silence is doing? Not to you, to the space between you and the people you love most. Because I did not ask myself that question, not once, not until it was almost too late, and by the time I finally did, the answer was the last thing I wanted to hear. So, what do you do when the person you love most in the world has just told you they thought they were in love with someone else? Even for a moment, even in confusion, even if they swear it meant nothing. What do you do with that? Because here is the truth: nobody tells you about betrayal, the physical kind, the affair kind that is brutal. That is devastating. But you can see it, you can point to it, you can say, this is what you did, this is the line you crossed. But emotional betrayal, the kind where someone's heart drifts toward another person in ways they do not even fully understand themselves, that kind of betrayal lives in the gray. It lives in the spaces between intention and action, between what they meant and what they felt, between the version of themselves they want to be and the version that showed up on that stage. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that you cannot even be cleanly angry about it, because she did not plan it, she did not scheme, she just felt something, and now you both have to live with it. I spent the next 3 days moving through our apartment like a ghost. We were both there, physically present, occupying the same rooms, breathing the same air, but we were not together. Not really. Rebecca tried to talk to me, multiple times. She would walk into the living room where I sat staring at nothing, and she would open her mouth to say something, anything, and then she would see my face, and the words would die in her throat. I was not giving her the silent treatment. That would imply I was punishing her. I was not. I just genuinely did not have words yet. My mind was stuck in this loop, replaying that confession over and over, trying to understand it, trying to fit it into the story I thought I knew about us. And every time I tried, the pieces did not fit. They just did not fit. So I stayed quiet, and she, reading that silence correctly for once, gave me space. But here is what you need to understand about silence in a relationship, and I mean really understand, because this is the lesson I learned too late. Silence is not neutral. It is not passive. It is not the absence of something. Silence is a choice. It is an action. And when two people who love each other choose silence, at the same time, what they are really choosing is slow suffocation. Because every hour that passes without words is another hour the distance grows. Every meal eaten separately. Every time you walk past each other in the hallway without making eye contact. Every night you sleep in separate rooms or back to back in the same bed, pretending you are asleep when you are both wide awake, staring at opposite walls, drowning in your own thoughts. That silence is not keeping the peace. It is building a wall, brick by brick, word by unspoken word. On the third night, and I remember this so clearly it feels like it just happened yesterday, I came home from work to find Rebecca sitting on the couch with something in her lap. I almost walked straight to the bedroom. I had gotten good at that. The avoidance. The careful choreography of two people existing in the same space without ever really occupying it together. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she was sitting, completely still, shoulders curved inward like she was protecting something fragile. Or maybe it was just that I was tired. Tired of the silence. Tired of the weight pressing on my chest every time I looked at her. Tired of carrying this alone. I stood in the doorway and I asked, my voice rough from 3 days of barely using it, what she was looking at. She did not answer right away. She just looked up at me with eyes that were already red, already wet, and she turned the thing in her lap so I could see it. Our wedding album. And something in my chest cracked open. I sat down, not next to her, but on the armchair across from the couch. Close enough to see, but far enough to feel safe. She flipped through pages slowly. I watched her fingers trace a photo of us cutting the cake, both laughing so hard the knife was halfway to dropping. I watched her pause on her dancing with her father, both mid-twirl. I watched her linger on one of me kneeling to dance with her niece, tiny hands in mine. And then she started crying. The quiet kind that comes from somewhere so deep, you just let it come. She said she missed them, the people we were in those pictures. She missed them so much it hurt to breathe, and I looked at that album and realized she was right. Those people smiling at the camera, surrounded by friends and family, beaming at each other like the world was full of possibility, they were gone, changed, worn down by time and distance and choices we did not even realize we were making. I moved to the couch, sat beside her. We went through the rest together without saying a word. Picture after picture of a love so big, it never occurred to us we might lose it. Every single picture was proof. Proof we had been real. Proof that what we built mattered. And proof that somewhere along the way we had let it slip through our fingers. When we got to the last page, Rebecca closed the album and set it down. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in days, and asked what I was thinking. And this is where the story changes. Because up until that moment, I had been the man who stayed silent, who avoided confrontation, who chose peace over honesty, even when that peace was killing us. But sitting there, looking at the woman I loved, looking at the album full of a life we built together, I realized something. If I stayed silent now, we were done. Not because she kissed Graham, not even because she felt something for him, but because silence had been the real killer all along. And I was not going to choose it anymore. So I told her the truth. I said, Rebecca, I think we both broke this. She started to shake her head, to take all the blame. But I stopped her. No, listen, I let this happen too. Every time you came home late and I said nothing. Every time you talked about Graham and I brushed it off. Every time I felt uneasy and swallowed it down, because I did not want to be the husband who held you back. Every single time I chose silence instead of honesty, I was making a choice. I was building the distance between us just as much as you were. She looked at me with shock. But the truth was messier than that. No villains here. Just two people who loved each other and still managed to hurt each other in ways neither saw coming. We talked for hours that night. Really talked. Rebecca told me she felt I was never part of her professional world. That she kept me separate because she did not think I would understand. And I told her she was right. I had checked out when she talked about work, so Graham filled that space. She told me about the pressure as the only black woman at her level, how every achievement had to be twice as good, how exhausting it was. And I told her I was sorry. I saw her ambition but not the cost, not what it was taking from her every day. So she found someone who did see it, someone who made her feel seen in ways I had stopped. That broke my heart, because I realized I had been failing her long before Graham entered the picture. But understanding how we got here did not change where we were. And where we were, sitting on that couch at 2 a.m, surrounded by wreckage, was not a place we could stay. Because love is not just feeling something for someone. It is about being healthy enough, whole enough to give that person what they need. And we were not those people anymore. Maybe we had been once. Maybe we could be again. But right now, we were two broken people trying to hold each other up, and all we were doing was dragging each other down. So I said something I never thought I would say. I think I need to leave. Not forever. Not as punishment. But for now, for both of us. Because staying here with all its ghosts, all this history pressing down, it was not helping us heal. It was keeping us stuck. I needed space to figure out who I was outside this marriage. And she needed that too. To rebuild her sense of self, to find her confidence, to figure out what she wanted without me clouding it with hurt and resentment. She did not argue. I think part of her had been waiting for one of us to be brave enough to say it. We could not fix this together. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But if there was any chance of finding our way back, we had to do the hardest thing two people who love each other can do. We had to let go. We did not decide anything about divorce or the future. Just that I would stay with my friend Peter for a while. That we would not make permanent decisions until we had time and space. We still loved each other. That was never the question. But love alone was not enough to fix what was broken. And then we sat in silence again. But this time, it was different. Not a wall. Just sad. Two people sitting with the enormity of what they had decided, knowing when the sun came up, everything would change. The next morning, I packed slowly. Some clothes, my laptop, a few books. Rebecca made coffee, but neither of us drank it. It sat there getting cold. We moved around each other carefully, fragile, barely holding it together. When I finished, I stood at the door with my duffel bag and keys. Rebecca stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around herself, tears streaming. She said she was sorry, for the 100th time. And I said, I am sorry too. Sorry I was not what you needed. Sorry I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. Sorry I let us get here. She shook her head, but I stopped her. It did not matter whose fault it was. We both made mistakes. We both hurt each other. The only question was whether we would do that together or apart. And right now, the answer was apart. Not because we did not love each other, but because we loved each other enough to know that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give someone space to heal. We kissed one last time, not like our wedding kiss full of joy and promise, not like lazy Sunday mornings. This kiss was slow, gentle, full of everything we were not saying out loud. I am sorry. I love you. I do not know if we will find our way back, but I hope we do. It tasted like salt from our tears, like goodbye. Not the final kind, but the kind that knows the road ahead is long and uncertain. When we pulled apart, I pressed my forehead to hers, closed my eyes, breathed her in one last time. Then I made myself turn around, made myself pick up that bag, made myself walk out, because if I stayed even one more second, I would not have had the strength to leave, and leaving was the only way forward. I got into the taxi waiting at the curb, looked up at our apartment window, and saw her standing there, one hand pressed against the glass. I pressed my hand to the taxi window. A silent goodbye. A promise this was not the end, even if it felt like it. Then the car pulled away. The city blurred past, lights and buildings and people going about their lives completely unaware mine had just fallen apart. And I let myself cry, really cry. For the first time since that gala, I let it all out. Every bit of pain and anger and grief and regret. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the woman I loved and the man I had been trying to be, for the future we planned and the life we built and the love that was real and deep and not enough to save us from ourselves. When the tears stopped and the taxi pulled up to Peter's building, I wiped my face and took a breath and told myself, this is not the end. This is just the hardest part. The part where you walk away from everything you know and trust that on the other side of this pain, there is something better waiting. Months passed, slowly, painfully, but they passed. I got my own apartment. Small, big windows, hardwood floors, no memories. I started therapy. We talked about marriage, about silence, about my part, about being better. I reconnected with old friends. I threw myself into work. I started running in the mornings, read books, all the things people do, rebuilding themselves from the ground up. Some days it worked. Some days I felt like I was making progress. Some days I woke up and the first thought was her, and the weight of missing her was so heavy I could barely get out of bed. But I got up anyway, every single time, one day at a time. Rebecca was doing her own work. I knew because we texted occasionally. Brief, careful, warm. How are you doing? I am thinking of you. We did not talk about marriage or the future, just checked in. She started volunteering at an art gallery on weekends, the same kind where we had met. She said it reminded her of who she used to be before the corporate world reshaped her. Said it felt like coming home. I told her I was proud of her. She told me she was in therapy too, working through guilt and shame, learning to forgive herself, learning to be whole on her own, instead of looking for someone else to complete her. We were both doing the work, separately. Maybe that was the point. Then one day, months after I walked out, I got a text from Rebecca's mother asking if I would come to church with her in Harlem. Just the two of us. No Rebecca. I said yes without hesitation. That Sunday, I met her outside the church I had visited so many times with Rebecca. We sat together near the back. The choir sang. The pastor preached about forgiveness and grace and the long, hard road to healing. And I sat there, a white man in a black church in Harlem, surrounded by a community that had welcomed me years ago. And I felt something I had not felt in months. Peace. Not the kind that comes from having all the answers, but the kind that comes from accepting some questions do not have answers yet. Some wounds take time. Some stories do not end neatly, and that is okay. After the service, Rebecca's mother and I walked to a cafe and talked. She told me she missed seeing me around, that she was praying for both of us. She did not know if Rebecca and I would find our way back, but she hoped we would. Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "Ashton, whatever happens, do not lose yourself in it. You are a good man. You deserve to be happy. Whether that happiness includes my daughter or not. That is love that transcends marriage, that transcends blood, that sees you as a person, not just as someone's husband. And it meant more than I can put into words. So where does that leave me? Where does that leave us? The truth is, I do not know. Rebecca and I are still separated. We have not filed for divorce. We have not decided if we ever will. We are just living, separately, doing the work, healing, growing, becoming the people we need to be. Maybe one day we will cross paths again, at another gallery opening or a coffee shop or some unexpected moment that feels like fate. And we will sit down and talk and realize the love is still there and the wounds have healed enough to try again. Maybe we will look at each other and see two people who have grown and are finally ready to build something better. Or maybe we will realize the love was real, but the relationship had run its course, that we were better as a chapter in each other's lives than as the whole story. I do not know. And for the first time, I am okay with not knowing. Because I have learned something. I have learned that love is not about holding on so tight you suffocate each other. It is about being brave enough to let go when letting go is the kindest thing you can do. About choosing yourself even when it hurts. About speaking up even when silence feels safer. About taking responsibility for your part instead of making yourself a victim or villain. And about trusting that whatever happens next, whether you find your way back or find new paths, you will be okay. Because you did the work. You faced hard truths. You stopped running from the pain and let it teach you something. And maybe that is the real ending. Not a tidy resolution where we either live happily ever after or crash and burn, but an honest one. One that says, here are two people who loved each other, who hurt each other, who made mistakes and owned them, who chose the hardest, most mature path forward, even when it meant walking away, who did not get a fairy tale ending but got something better, a chance to become whole again. So if you are listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if you recognize the silence, the distance, the moment when love was not enough, I want you to ask yourself something. What are you not saying? What fear are you swallowing down? What truth are you avoiding because speaking it feels too dangerous? And think about this, the silence you are choosing right now, the one that feels like protection, like peace, like the safe option, is it actually keeping you safe? Or is it slowly killing the thing you are trying so hard to protect? Because I stayed silent, for months, for years maybe. I stayed silent until it was almost too late. And if I could go back and do one thing differently, it would not be to stop Rebecca from kissing Graham. It would not be to fight harder to keep us together. It would be to speak up, earlier, louder, honestly. To say the hard things when they were still small enough to fix, instead of waiting until they were big enough to break us. So speak up. Whatever it is you are carrying, whatever fear is sitting in your chest, whatever truth you have been swallowing down because you think it will hurt less if you do not say it out loud. Say it. Say it to the person you love. Say it to yourself. Say it before the silence becomes the thing that destroys you both. Because here is what I know now. The pain of speaking the truth is sharp and immediate and brutal. But it ends. The pain of staying silent? That one never does. It just grows. Quietly. Slowly. Until one day you wake up and you do not even recognize the person lying next to you anymore. Or worse, you do not recognize yourself. So do not wait for a gala. Do not wait for a kiss. Do not wait for the moment when everything falls apart. Speak now, while there is still time, while the love is still there, while the story can still be rewritten. Because if there is one thing I have learned, it is this: silence is not golden. Silence is not safe. Silence is a choice. And it is a choice that comes with a cost. So, what are you choosing? And is it worth the price you will have to pay?